today's the last day of that, I guess I'd say packet, depending on whether it's stapled or not, but packet about the Crusades. We talked the past few days about really just failure of the Christians to come together and to win these wars and retake Jerusalem for good. So the question is, when you lose a religious war, it can literally tear you apart from the inside because you believe you were supposed to win. So the question is, well, what do? Do you switch religion? Do you change the way your religion is? How do you go about losing something that you were, in your mind, guaranteed to win, right? So what I have here is basically kind of talk about what happens afterwards, right? So the first thing is the church, well, it changes. We talked about the other day how popes lost power and the kings gained power. But people got to figure out a reason why. You can't really just probably blame it on the pope for the whole reason you lost these wars. There's got to be other things too. So what starts to happen is the church kind of separates into two factions. One group believes the church shouldn't be involved in things like war and politics. Stay in your lane, stick to religion, values. That's where you're supposed to be. The other group thinks the church isn't doing enough. They need to be more involved in war. They need to be more involved in punishing people who go against their religion. That's why they lost. So it almost reminds me to a point of just like the different views of what Democrats and Republicans believe in this country. They're just total opposites. There really isn't that middle ground. Either you're on one side or the other. And it's hard to be in between because both groups believe so strongly that they're right. And the same thing's going on at this time here. Okay, I think anytime when you have really kind of a national or religious catastrophe, it really pulls people to complete extremes. And after the Crusades and this loss, it's no different. Let's put this up here. Many people believe that the church should not be involved in war or politics. Just religion. Others believe the church should do more to punish non-Christians. Okay? So these different views definitely kind of take us into this late part of the Middle Ages, right? And what the people that believe the church need to do more kind of get into their mind is, we lost the Crusades not because God was punishing us or that our religion's wrong or even that the Pope was lying. We lost because we skipped a step. We were running off all the way to Jerusalem to go kill Muslims and, in some situations, Jewish people to take what was ours. Yet, in our own countries, we have non-Christians. We have Jewish people living in our towns. We have Muslims in parts of Europe. We skipped a step. We're supposed to clean up the mess in our own house first, then we can go outside and reclaim what is ours. We skipped a step and God punishes. He's like, clean up your own home first, then go out and clean up others. Right? So they call this next era, kind of after Crusades, the reconquesting time, reconquista. Reclaim, okay, or reconquer what we've lost. Christians reconquer Europe. Because if you remember back a few chapters ago, we talked about the Battle of Tours. and how the Muslims took away what is known as the Iberian Peninsula. Now, I didn't use this term, okay? The Iberian Peninsula is the southwestern peninsula in Europe. It contains two countries, Spain and Portugal. Like, we need to retake places like this where the Muslims are and make it ours again. So they start focusing on areas like that and not going to these faraway lands, like all the way over to Israel and to Lebanon and Syria. Let's focus on this first, okay? But they also had to focus on the people in their country, their own countries, who weren't Christians. And that's where this next era, the Inquisition, becomes a major factor in people's lives. You may have heard of this before, okay? But Inquisition basically just means a court, okay? It's a court that was run by the Roman Catholic Church. To find and punish non-Christians. We've seen this throughout history. We've seen it with the Romans. I don't know if you remember this, but Diocletian had to figure out who was and who was not Christian. So if you remember, he sent around a cart of animals, and he forced the people to sacrifice. And if they refused, he knew who the Christians were. Okay. But now we're looking at it from the opposite standpoint, finding the non-Christians. So you can't walk around with a cart of animals and say, hey, will you sacrifice? And someone says no. Say, oh, okay, you're obviously Christian then. It doesn't really work that way. So they got to go out of a way to figure out who is and who is not Christian. And this court that was presided over basically by priests, people in the church, are going to figure out who these people are, right? So how do they do this? Let me slide this over. They did it in about as terrible a manner as possible. So they would have people basically, how do I say this? Bring them people that they thought weren't Christian. I don't mean like capture them and bring them. Basically, people would come forward to the church and say, hey, my neighbor, they haven't been going to church on Sundays. I don't know. I think that they're not Christian. I think that they're going just here and there to pretend like they're Christian. So these priests, judges, would bring people to the Inquisition, to the court. And they would ask them, are you Christian? And the people would answer. If they believed them, they'd say, okay, expect to see you in church more often. I would think at that point probably people would go to church more often. What if they don't believe them? Well, they would attach them to a device called the rack. And the rack is essentially a torture device. They torture people to find out who wasn't Christian. There we go. So the way the rack worked, it was a table. Oh, here we go, get my hands more here. It was a table. On each end was a gear with two sets of ropes. They would tie around your ankles and around your wrists. So they would ask you again, are you sure you're Christian? You'd say, yes. They didn't believe you. They would turn the gears and it would start to pull you, stretch you. And they'd ask you again, are you sure you're Christian? You'd say, yes. If they didn't believe you, turn again. Start to separate your wrists, your elbows, your shoulder joints, your hips, your knees, your ankles. And they'd keep pulling you to the point they either believed you and thought you actually were Christian, or until they ripped you apart or paralyzed you, right? If the person kept demanding they were Christian and they ripped them apart, killed them, they might say, oh, wow, there's no way people can take that kind of torture. They must truly be Christian. Well, at least now they go to heaven. Yeah, it makes you feel real good about yourself then. You did a good job. You sent them to heaven, okay? If the person couldn't take the pain, or maybe they just weren't Christian and weren't going to be tortured, and they admitted, I'm not Christian, they would then take them off the rack, tie them to a pole, and light them on fire. Burn them at the stake. But non-Christians were burned at the stake. This is how they dealt with it. They believed by killing these non-Christians, they were letting God know they were doing his work. They were getting rid of the people that should not be living in their countries, should not be in their territories, and eliminating them for them. They called these people heretics. Okay? A heretic is basically anybody who either is another religion or just doesn't want to be Christian. They could be Jewish, they could be Muslim, they could be a quote-unquote a witch. Anything that is not Christian, they are called a heretic. Right? So this one side of the religion is basically killing and torturing people, trying to reconquer places. Then you got the other side led by people like St. Francis. He's teaching the opposite. He's teaching that the reason we lost is because we're breaking the main principles of the Bible. It says thou shalt not kill. We're killing. Okay? We're supposed to follow God's teachings, not play God ourselves and go kill people. If he wants somebody taken out, he's God. He does what he's going to do. He obviously created him for a reason. So it brings us back to kind of his main principle is treat every living thing with respect. So you have this complete opposites in terms of point of view, okay? And, it's a shame. Like I said, I keep bringing up, kind of the turmoil our country's going through right now. But what he would basically be teaching is, hey, listen to what the Republicans say, or listen to what the Democrats have to say. You don't have to believe it. You don't have to follow that. But it's not up to you to teach them what you believe, right? Your job is to listen and then let the chips fall where they may. Okay, that's not up to you to go out and punish. It's not up to you to go out and kill. You're supposed to just go about your day, and at the end, God will decide. If he wants to go to heaven, go to heaven. The ones he doesn't, they won't. Okay, so I don't know. It's a very frustrating time period. That on one side, sorry, that sneeze is coming. I feel like for like a minute. On one side, they are teaching to go all out killing. The other side, the complete opposite. It's completely different points of view, okay? So as you see some evolution going on in the church of what's kind of the belief of what they should be doing, you also see a big change in what's going on from a government standpoint, okay? Kings have gotten a lot more power during this time period, okay? And in some countries, one in particular, the king is really taking advantage of this, okay? So in England, the people basically get together, mainly the wealthy, okay, and they create what we would call a constitution, okay? They call it the Magna Carta, or Great Charter, okay? By definition, Magna Carta is a written agreement that basically limited the power of the English monarch or English king. Okay, so King John, all right, is a person who was forced to sign this. I'm going to talk about how this actually happens. All right, so what King John was doing is he was trying to make himself more and more powerful. Right? England has definitely kind of fallen on a little bit of harder times from a money standpoint. They spent a lot of money sending armies over to retake Jerusalem. And obviously that did not work out. They did not get their money back for what they invested to try to get it. And John himself spent a lot of his own money doing this, as well as the kings before him. So, his bank account was a little empty. So he started actually arresting wealthy people, put him in jail with no actual reason, and then sending the army to basically steal their valuables, right? And then would release the person. And he would then keep the valuables himself to use to build up his army or whatever he wanted to do with it. Well, the wealthy got obviously sick and tired of this, okay? So one day John was basically walking to church. Oh, get a little better here. Walking to church, and someone walks up from behind him, throws a black sack over his head, and hits him over the head with a club. He wakes up with his head tied down basically to a stump, like a table. It's hard to say if it was a table or a stump. And they take the bag off his head, and he looks in front of him, and sitting in front of him is a Magna Carta. Above him is a man twirling an axe. And he basically said, you can sign this document and give away about 7% of your power, or you can refuse to sign it, and we're going to cut off 100% of your head. Choice is yours. Well, it was a pretty easy choice, okay? To lose just a small percentage of your power and keep the entire percentage of your head is definitely an easy choice, okay? So why did they basically want him to sign this? Well, they just wanted to basically make it so they had some rights that they knew were guaranteed. Things John could not do. For example, he could no longer just arrest you without accusing you of a crime and then steal all your stuff. He couldn't just raise your taxes if you wanted to go to war. He basically had to run it by you and have it passed by a committee. So this limited things that John could do. Was it a lot of stuff? No, there's not a ton of things on here. But it was basic rights, that things that John could not do. This gave the people of England a list of guaranteed rights, things that could not be taken away. I don't like to do this, but, this is part of what we got to prepare for. The achievement test. So far, as long as I've been teaching, they've only had 2 dates ever on it. One is the fall of Rome, 476. The other is when the Magna Carta was signed. When was it signed? 1215. I would like you to know that. 1215. All right. This is an important date for England, of course, because this is kind of the beginning of a formal, like we call it, constitution, okay? But it's important to us because we take a lot of these ideas and put it as part of ours, all right? Let me go ahead and slide this over here. So what are some of the things in the Magna Carta? Well, one of the basic rights is one that I talked about. It's called habeas corpus. People can't be put in jail. Chalk is stuck. Can't be put in jail without being accused of a crime and a trial, basically proving their guilt. You can't just arrest somebody for no reason. You have to have a trial. You have to have them accused of something they did, evidence of what they did, and then hold the trial and then convict them and put them in jail. You can't just arrest somebody, okay, and take away their freedom, right? This was one of the basic things they wanted because this is how John was stealing out of their money. The other thing they created is that John did not get to make every decision. Things, like I said, like raising taxes had to be run by a special committee. What did they call that committee? They called it Parliament. So a group of, we're just going to call them nobles. It's basically the wealthy. Group of nobles helped the king make decisions. Today, they are elected. Right? So John cannot make any decision he wants. Things like going to war, that's a decision he gets to keep. Okay? But stuff like raising taxes, things that like affect the people directly. Oh, you say going to war affects you directly. Yes, but he still got to do that. Those are things that the Parliament helps them decide. Okay? Today, basically, Parliament is what runs England. We'll kind of talk about that more here in a second. Okay? But this sets up to create what is called a constitutional monarchy. This is one of the most popular types of government in the world today. Okay? Pretty basic definition. A king or queen has little or even no power. They share power with a group of elected officials. So basically, there are countries around the world today that have kings or queens, but the king or queen only has a portion of the power. There are some countries where the king or queen has a 50% stake. There's some countries where the king or queen only has a 25% stake. There's some countries like England where the king, today it's a queen, has no power. The only power they have is basically to do that weird wave and just to influence people. They can make their opinions. They can talk to the press. They can say what they think the country should do. No one has to listen to them. Okay? In the case today, Parliament in England makes all the decisions. Okay? Some countries don't call it Parliament. Some countries call it like a Congress or a legislative. But it's the same thing. It's elected officials that make the decisions instead. Like I said, it just depends. Every country has it laid out differently, the powers of what the king and queen can and cannot do. Okay? John signed the Magna Carta in 1215. 700 years later, the king and queen actually lost complete power. It seemed like over the next 700 years, every time the king or queen made a bad decision, they would lose a little bit more power. And when World War I hit and England got involved, and then right afterwards went into the Great Depression, that was the final blow. They kind of blamed the king for the loss, for the Great Depression, and said, you know what? We're done with you. You make terrible decisions. Now we're letting Parliament make all the decisions. So this is how long it took for the king or queen to lose complete power. So like today, Queen Elizabeth II, she may be the queen, but it's really just a title. She technically really has no real power, okay? And I mentioned this before, but I just want to put it here at the end. The Magna Carta is important to us because every right that basically is in the Magna Carta, we added a part of our Constitution. Sure, we don't call things like Parliament, we call it Congress, okay? But it was a major influence to our Constitution. So you can see, that after the Crusades, there's a number of things that change, okay? Whether it's religion, whether it is politics, the Crusades left their mark, all right? And well, definitely things we still see today are happening from what started literally, almost 1,000 years ago, all right? Okay, so we're gonna stop here. The daily quiz is called Inquisition, all right? So make sure you take that and have a wonderful day.